I grew up believing that love could conquer anything, that if you married your best friend, built a home together, created a family, nothing could tear that foundation apart. I learned the hard way that sometimes the cracks in a foundation run deeper than you can see, buried under generations of lies. It was November 1987 when my world shattered in the maternity ward of St. Mary's Hospital in Springfield, Ohio. I was 28 years old, exhausted from 16 hours of labor, holding my newborn daughter against my chest. She was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a rosebud mouth that searched instinctively for milk. But when the nurse placed her in my arms and pulled back the hospital blanket, I saw my mother-in-law's face go white as chalk. My daughter had a full head of copper-red hair and eyes that would later turn the brightest shade of blue I'd ever seen. My husband Richard stood frozen beside the bed, his brown eyes fixed on our baby girl with an expression I couldn't quite read. His mother, Patricia, gripped the metal bed rail so hard her knuckles turned bone white. "That's impossible," Patricia whispered, her voice cutting through the beeping monitors and soft sounds of the maternity ward. I looked up at her, confusion clouding my exhaustion. "What's impossible?" She pointed a trembling finger at my daughter. "That hair. Those eyes. Where did they come from?" My husband Richard had dark brown hair and brown eyes, inherited from his mother. I had mousy brown hair myself, hazel eyes that changed between brown and green depending on the light. Neither of us had a single redhead in our immediate families, as far as we knew. "It's just genetics, Mom," Richard said quietly, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Recessive genes or something. Don't be naive." Patricia's voice turned sharp, accusatory. She turned her pale blue eyes on me with such venom that I instinctively pulled my baby closer. "I want a paternity test." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. The fluorescent hospital lights suddenly seemed too bright, the antiseptic smell too strong. "What did you just say?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "You heard me." Patricia stepped closer to the bed, her designer purse clutched against her chest like armor. "Something isn't right here. That child doesn't look anything like our family." "Mom, stop." Richard's voice was weak, uncertain. He wouldn't look at me. "Richard, use your brain!" Patricia snapped at her son. "When was the last time anyone in our family had red hair? Or blue eyes? This is absurd. She's been lying to you." I felt tears burning in my eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. "How dare you? I have never been unfaithful to Richard. Not once. Not ever." "Then explain that!" She jabbed her finger toward my sleeping daughter again. "I don't have to explain anything to you. She's my daughter. Our daughter." I looked at Richard desperately, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his mother she was being ridiculous. But he just stood there, his jaw clenched, staring at our baby with those same uncertain eyes. "Richard?" My voice cracked. He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his face broke something inside me. Doubt. After 5 years of marriage, after carrying his child for 9 months, after 16 hours of bringing his daughter into this world, he doubted me. "I think we should do the test," he said quietly, just to put Mom's mind at ease. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I held my daughter tighter and turned my face away from both of them. "Get out, honey. Get out!" I shouted, my voice raw. "Both of you, get out of my room right now." A nurse rushed in, alerted by my raised voice. "Is everything all right here?" "No," I said, my voice shaking. "Everything is not all right. I want them to leave. Now." The nurse, a kind-faced woman in her 50s named Susan, looked between me and my husband's family with a knowing expression. She'd probably seen this drama play out before. "I think it's best if you let the new mother rest," she said firmly to Richard and Patricia. "You can come back during regular visiting hours tomorrow." Patricia opened her mouth to protest, but Susan cut her off. "Hospital policy. Mom and baby need rest after delivery. You need to leave." Richard looked like he wanted to say something, but his mother grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. "We'll be back tomorrow," Patricia said coldly, "and we'll be bringing paperwork for that paternity test." After they left, I sat in that hospital bed holding my daughter and cried until no more tears would come. Susan stayed with me, bringing me water and tissues, not saying much but offering a comforting presence. "Want to talk about it?" she finally asked, sitting in the chair beside my bed. I told her everything, about how Richard and I had met in college, how we'd fallen in love over late-night study sessions and weekend adventures, how his mother had never quite approved of me because my family didn't have money, didn't move in the right social circles, how I'd tried for 5 years to win her over, to prove I was good enough for her precious son, how I'd thought that giving her a grandchild might finally bridge that gap between us. And now this, I finished bitterly. She's accusing me of cheating because my baby doesn't look the way she expected. Susan was quiet for a moment, gently smoothing my daughter's red hair. "You know," she said slowly, "genetics are funny things. Sometimes traits skip generations. Sometimes they come from places you don't expect. But Richard doesn't believe me," I whispered. "He actually wants to do the test." "Then do it," Susan said firmly. "Prove them wrong. Show them both that this beautiful little girl is exactly who she's supposed to be." I looked down at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in my arms, unaware of the storm raging around her. "You're right," I said. "I'll do the damn test. And when it proves I'm telling the truth, I want an apology." On their knees. The next morning, Richard came back alone. He looked like he hadn't slept, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He stood in the doorway of my room, holding a bouquet of roses that felt like an insult more than an apology. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer, just looked at him with the coldest expression I could muster. He came in anyway, setting the flowers on the side table. "I'm sorry about yesterday. Mom was out of line." "Was she?" I asked sharply. "Because you seemed to agree with her." He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. I was surprised, that's all. The red hair, the blue eyes, it caught me off guard. "So you immediately assumed I'd been unfaithful?" "No. I don't know what I thought." He sank into the chair beside the bed. "I'm confused, sweetheart. You have to understand. It doesn't make sense genetically." "Fine," I said coldly. "Order your paternity test. Get your DNA proof. But understand this, Richard. Our marriage will never be the same. You chose your mother's paranoia over 5 years of trust. You looked at our daughter and saw a stranger instead of your own child. That's something I won't forget." His face crumpled. "Please don't say that. It's the truth. I looked down at our sleeping daughter. I'll do your test. But after it proves I'm telling the truth, you're going to owe me more than flowers and half-hearted apologies." The paternity test was scheduled for 3 days later. Dr. Morrison, our family physician, drew blood from Richard, swabbed the inside of our daughter's cheek, and took my blood sample as well. The whole process felt clinical and horrible, like we were on some daytime talk show instead of being a real family. "Results will take about a week, doctor," Morrison said, avoiding eye contact with me. I could tell he thought this whole thing was ridiculous, but Patricia had called in favors with the hospital board to fast-track the testing. Money and social connections, always opening doors for the Richardson family. That week was the longest of my life. I stayed at my parents' small house across town, refusing to go back to the home Richard and I had bought together. My mother fussed over the baby and over me, while my father muttered darkly about that Richardson woman and her accusations. "Want me to go over there and give them a piece of my mind?" my dad asked more than once, his weathered hands clenching into fists. "No, Dad," I told him. "Let the test results speak for themselves." But privately, I was terrified. Not because I'd done anything wrong. I knew with absolute certainty that Richard was my daughter's father, but because I'd seen doubt in my husband's eyes, and I knew our marriage might not survive this, even after the truth came out. Richard called me every day, begging to come see the baby, to talk things through. I let him come twice, supervised visits where my mother sat in the corner like a prison guard, watching his every move. He held our daughter with such tenderness, such longing, but I kept my distance. I couldn't let my guard down, not yet. On the 7th day, Dr. Morrison called. "Can you and Richard come to my office this afternoon? I have the results." My heart hammered in my chest. "Just tell me over the phone." "I really think you should both be here," he said, his voice strange. "Careful, and I'd suggest bringing your mother-in-law as well." That response terrified me more than anything. Why would he want Patricia there? Why couldn't he just tell me the results? Unless. No, that was impossible. I hadn't been with anyone else, not ever. But doubt crept in anyway, insidious and horrible. Could there have been a mistake at the hospital? A switched baby? My daughter had been in the nursery for a few hours while I slept. Could something have happened? I called Richard with shaking hands. Dr. Morrison wants to see us, today, he said, to bring your mother. There was a long pause on his end. Did he say what the results were? No, just that we all need to be there. That afternoon, I walked into Dr. Morrison's office with my daughter in my arms, my mother beside me for support, and my whole world feeling like it was balanced on a knife's edge. Richard was already there with Patricia, who looked smug and vindicated, like she'd already won some unspoken battle. Dr. Morrison sat behind his desk, a manila folder in front of him, his expression grave. "Thank you all for coming," he began. These situations are never easy, and I want to preface this by saying that what I'm about to share is medically accurate but may be shocking for everyone involved. Patricia leaned forward. "Just tell us if that child is my son's or not." Dr. Morrison opened the folder. "The baby is definitely Richard's biological daughter. The DNA match is conclusive." Relief flooded through me so powerfully I almost fell to my knees. "Thank God," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I turned to Patricia triumphantly. I told you both I never cheated." But Dr. Morrison held up his hand. "There's more, and this is where it gets complicated." We all froze. "When we run paternity tests, we analyze specific genetic markers," he continued carefully. "In doing so, we sometimes discover unexpected information. In this case, we found something unusual in Richard's DNA profile." Richard frowned. "What do you mean? Unusual?" "Dr. Morrison looked directly at Patricia, his expression sympathetic but firm. "Mrs. Richardson, when was the last time your husband had genetic testing done?" Patricia's face went pale. "My husband? What does Edmund have to do with this? Please answer the question." "Never. Edmund has never had any genetic testing. Why would he?" Dr. Morrison pulled out another sheet from the folder. "Because Richard's DNA shows markers that are inconsistent with Edmund Richardson being his biological father." The room went utterly silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the fluorescent lights, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "That's impossible," Patricia breathed, her hand flying to her throat. "I ran the test 3 times to be absolutely certain," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "Richard, your daughter has red hair and blue eyes because she inherited recessive genes that are present in your genetic makeup, genes that did not come from Edmund Richardson." Richard looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Edmund Richardson is not your biological father." Patricia stood up so fast her chair crashed backward. "This is outrageous. You're lying. The test is wrong." "The test is not wrong, Mrs. Richardson." "Doctor," Morrison's voice was steel. "And I think you know that." She opened her mouth to protest again, but no words came out. Her face had gone from pale to gray, and she swayed on her feet. Richard caught her arm, his own face a mask of shock and confusion. "Mom?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Is this true?" Patricia looked at her son, then at me, then back at Dr. Morrison. I watched as 30 years of carefully constructed lies crumbled in her eyes. She sank back into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. "It was before I married your father," she finally whispered. "I was young. Stupid. I got involved with someone I shouldn't have." "Who?" Richard demanded. "It doesn't matter now. He's dead." "It matters to me." Richard's voice rose, raw with pain and anger. "You've built your entire life on a lie. You've raised me thinking Edmund was my father. You accused my wife of the exact thing you did yourself." Patricia flinched as if he'd slapped her. "It's not the same." "How is it not the same?" I found my voice, cold and hard. "You cheated. You got pregnant. You passed that child off as your husband's. And then you had the audacity to accuse me of doing exactly what you did, except I actually didn't do it." "You don't understand," Patricia said desperately. "It was different back then. I was engaged to Edmund. His family had money, connections. If anyone found out I'd been with someone else, if I'd had that baby out of wedlock, I would have been ruined, completely ruined. So you lied to Edmund? Richard's hands were shaking. You let him believe I was his son for my entire life? He was your father in every way that mattered, Patricia insisted. He raised you, loved you, paid for your education. What difference does biology make? What difference? Richard laughed bitterly. You just spent the last week accusing my wife based entirely on biology. You demanded a paternity test because our daughter didn't have the right hair color, and now you're saying biology doesn't matter? Dr. Morrison cleared his throat. I should mention that the red hair and blue eyes your daughter has, those are traits that were likely present in Richard's biological father's genetic line. They're recessive genes that skipped Richard's generation but appeared in his daughter. I looked down at my baby girl, sleeping peacefully through the worst family drama of our lives. Her copper hair gleamed under the office lights. She was beautiful and perfect and completely innocent in all of this. Who was he? I asked Patricia quietly. Richard's biological father. What was his name? Patricia was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she whispered, Patrick O'Connor. He was Irish, worked construction. We met at a church social. He had red hair and blue eyes. Is that why you went so crazy when you saw the baby? My mother spoke up for the first time, her voice sharp. You saw those features and knew exactly what they meant? That your own secret was about to be exposed? Patricia didn't answer, but the guilt on her face was confirmation enough. Richard stood abruptly, pacing the small office like a caged animal. I can't believe this. I can't believe any of this. My entire life has been a lie. Patricia reached for him, but he jerked away. Don't touch me. Don't even look at me right now. He turned to Dr. Morrison. Does my father know? Does Edmund know? Not from me, Dr. Morrison said. Patient confidentiality applies here, but you may want to consider whether you want to tell him. Tell him? Richard laughed harshly. Tell the man who raised me, who I believed was my father, that the woman he's been married to for 40 years lied to him from the very beginning? How do I do that? I don't know, I said softly, standing up and going to my husband. Despite everything that had happened between us, despite the doubt and accusations and pain, he was still my husband, and he was hurting. I touched his arm gently. But we'll figure it out together. He looked at me with such anguish in his eyes. I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. You were telling the truth the whole time and I doubted you. I let her poison my mind against you. I know. I took his hand, squeezing it. And we'll deal with that. But right now, your whole world just got turned upside down, and I'm not going to abandon you. Patricia stood up, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. I should go. Yes, I said coldly. You should. And don't come back until you're ready to apologize. On your knees, like I said. She looked at me with something between hatred and grudging respect. Without another word, she left the office, her designer heels clicking on the linoleum floor. After she was gone, Richard collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. Dr. Morrison tactfully left the room, giving us privacy. My mother took the baby from my arms, whispering that she'd wait outside. What do I do? Richard asked, his voice muffled. How do I process this? I sat beside him, my anger softening in the face of his pain. One day at a time, one moment at a time. Does Edmund deserve to know? I thought about that carefully. I don't know. That's your decision to make. But think about what it would do to him, finding out after 40 years. She deserves to be exposed, Richard said bitterly. After what she did to you, to us, she deserves to have her perfect reputation destroyed. Maybe, I agreed. But is that revenge worth destroying your father's world? We sat in that office for a long time, holding hands, trying to make sense of the wreckage of our family. In the end, Richard decided not to tell Edmund. It was a decision I supported, though I understood why others might disagree. Edmund Richardson was 70 years old, had a heart condition, and genuinely loved Richard as his son. The truth would have destroyed him, and Richard wasn't willing to do that, no matter how much his mother deserved the consequences. But we did set boundaries. Patricia wasn't allowed around our daughter unsupervised for years. She had to earn back our trust, inch by painful inch. She wrote me a formal apology letter, though it took her 6 months to do it. She admitted she'd been projecting her own guilt onto me, that seeing those red hair and blue eyes had triggered a panic response she couldn't control. It wasn't enough, not really. But it was something. Richard and I went to counseling together. We had to rebuild our marriage from the ground up, reconstruct the trust that had been shattered in that hospital room. It took time, years, honestly. There were nights I still woke up angry, remembering the doubt in his eyes when he first saw our daughter. But we did rebuild, because we loved each other, and because we both loved our daughter more than we loved our pride. Our daughter, Emily, grew up beautiful and bright, with copper hair that turned auburn in the sunlight and eyes as blue as a summer sky. She looks nothing like either of us, and everything like the Irish grandfather she never met. When she was old enough, we told her the truth about her genetics, about the family secret that her birth had exposed. She took it better than we expected. "So I'm like a living truth detector," she joked. "My existence literally exposed a decades-old lie." "Something like that," Richard agreed, with a sad smile. Patricia died when Emily was 15, taking most of her secrets to the grave. Edmund never knew the truth. He died 2 years later, still believing Richard was his biological son, still loving him just the same. Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice, keeping that secret. But then I remember Edmund's face at Emily's christening, the way he held his granddaughter with such tenderness and pride. I remember how he taught Richard to play chess, to ride a bike, to be a good man. And I think that maybe biology doesn't matter as much as love. But I also remember that week of hell when my marriage hung in the balance because of a stranger's genes. I remember the accusation in Patricia's eyes, the doubt in Richard's voice. I remember the cold certainty that my life was about to fall apart because my daughter had the wrong color hair. And I'm grateful. Grateful that the truth came out. Grateful that Patricia's hypocrisy was exposed. Grateful that my daughter's beautiful red hair saved my marriage by revealing secrets that had been buried for far too long. Now I'm 65 years old, and Emily is 37 with red-haired children of her own. She named her daughter Patricia, which I thought was generous of her. Richard said it was Emily's way of making peace with a complicated legacy. I still remember that day in the hospital, holding my newborn daughter while my world crumbled. I remember thinking that love wasn't enough, that trust could be broken by something as simple as genetics. But I was wrong. Love is enough. Trust can be rebuilt. And sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is exactly what a family needs to survive. My daughter's red hair didn't destroy my marriage. It saved it by forcing us to confront lies we didn't even know existed. And 37 years later, I can honestly say I'm grateful for every copper strand.